All right. So today we're going to be looking here in a moment in Psalm chapter 46. This is a familiar psalm. I've preached on it before. I was trying to, I know last week was Memorial Day, and I know that was the week right after the tragic shooting in Uvalde, and I've been kind of trying to process that, just as everybody has, just how horrific that event is, and how do we try to process that? How do we respond? Is there a biblical model that's good to follow in that? Because it's, I'm assuming no one, I don't know of anyone who was directly impacted, right? Who directly lost a loved one. That's a whole different thing. But this is one of those events that impacts all of society. We are all impacted by it. And I feel like our society is we're doing a worse and worse job of responding to things like this. And so, I believe I have, that the Bible has the answer for how society should respond. But unfortunately, many are going to choose not to follow that. But you know what? We can. We can seek to know what is a biblical response. We can do that and hopefully be a model to others. Because the one thing that we don't want to be is contributing to the chaos in light of these events. And so I thought about Psalm 46. Psalm 46 is a very familiar psalm and one that you will recognize. And I do think it gives us kind of a model of how we process and how we should process tragedy, events that we have very little control over, things that just overwhelm us. I think this really speaks to that. So Psalm 46, before I get started, it says, "For the director of music of the Sons of Korah." All right. I just want to throw this out. This is just really interesting, and there's a line in this psalm that I think is important to connect with this. The Sons of Korah, that was a family group of, within the people of Israel that has a history, and not a great history. If you remember, going back after Moses, after the people got the 10 Commandments, after they started having the tabernacle, so the priests started doing their jobs, and then you had other people that were called to do other things, and there was a group of people. One of them was Korah and some of his family, as well as two other families. They didn't like their role. They wanted to have a better role and a more important role, so they actually tried to have a coup against Moses. All right? You've got to be careful with coups anyway, but especially whenever you're going against the guy that God spoke to from a burning bush and stuff like that. You better have everything ready if you're going to go up against him. Right? So, well, needless to say, they didn't. So they were caught, and it was a large group of people that were trying to stir up trouble. And you have this interesting scene where Moses says, "Okay, we're just going to let God judge. If I'm in the wrong, then God can strike me down. But if you're in the wrong, you're not going to see another sunset," basically. And what happened was, one of those things that just kind of, the earth actually opens up beneath the sons of Korah and the other people who had started this coup, and they all die. And very obvious that it was God that was doing this, right? That this was judgment because they were going directly against God, right? They didn't want to follow God, and this was their judgment, okay? So you read in Psalms now, this is the sons of Korah that are part of this group that's probably, put this to music and stuff. It's interesting because that line, not all of them participated. They obviously learned from it. And you read through David, they actually were a strong part and allies with King David. It's really kind of interesting. And they became a very integral part in temple worship, the sons of Korah. But they literally, in their past, the earth opened up and swallowed some of them. with that being said, let's read Psalm 46. God is our refuge and our strength, an ever-present help in times of trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us, the God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars to cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in all the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress." Right? Man, that's a powerful, powerful psalm. And it sure gives a little bit of different meaning to, though the earth give way. Right? The sons of Korah, they knew what that looked like. You know, whenever I was coming up with a picture, I always try to do something that has a little bit of the verse, and I'll be completely transparent. I do that on Sunday morning. I just do a Google image search, and I type in, like, where I know the plans I have, or be still and know that I am God, and tons of them come up with images that have that scripture written on there, and I pick one that looks good, okay? Maybe I'm stealing that. I don't know. It lets me download it, so there we go. Today I did the same thing. I was looking, and all the pictures were pictures of a beautiful sunset over the ocean, beautiful mountains, serene pictures, which, by the way, be still and know that I am God. That's designed to kind of a serene image. However, the image painted in Psalm 46 is not a serene image. The earth is giving way. The mountains are falling into the sea. And so I found this picture. This is a giant, the earth giving way. And this is in Russia. I'm not sure exactly when. And I think about if I lived in that house right there on the corner, or that one up on that corner. Would I be able to be still and know that he is God? Right? Now, I don't think God would say, just stay in that house. I think he would say, yeah, move away. Right? But the thing that I love about this psalm is that the imagery is of things in chaos, of things falling apart, of us being completely out of control. And in the midst of that, being still and knowing that he is God. In the midst of the chaos. See, what we tend to do as individuals and as a society is that we meet chaos and we meet, whenever we go through and experience things that we can't understand or things that just cause emotional reactions, that we meet that with an equal emotional reaction. So, or we try to fight chaos with chaos, right? Or something happens and we're like, okay, we have to fix this. What can we do? Right? And we have to be really careful with that. And I think in light of what's happened a couple of weeks ago in Uvalde, we have seen that as a society, we are not handling this well, right? We respond to these overwhelming, horrific tragedies in ways that actually make it worse, not better. So Psalm 46, what does it teach us? What is the kind of principle behind it? Well, the first thing is the most important part of the psalm. It's not, the be still and know is a vital part. It is how you remember that this is true. What is true is that God is our refuge and our strength, an ever-present help in times of trouble. That is the unchanging truth. That is what, it doesn't matter what's going on. It doesn't matter if you were the house in the middle of that sinkhole. It is still true that God is your refuge and your strength. Now, as the land is falling from you, you're not going to feel that. In fact, you're going to have lots of questions. You're probably going to have some anger. You're probably going to be frustrated. And it's not going to feel like God is your refuge or your strength, an ever-present help in times of trouble. It's not going to feel that way, which is why you have to then be still, allow those emotions to calm down, be still, and know that He is God. Know that, yes, He is still my refuge, even though my home has been destroyed, that place that I thought was where I found refuge. He still is my strength, even though now I am weak. Right? So this psalm starts off naming the truth that God is our refuge and our strength and ever-present help in times of trouble. Then it starts listing the times of trouble. And it doesn't list little ones. It uses imagery of cataclysmic events, right? The land opening up, the mountains falling into the heart of the sea, things that you have no control over, right? That are taking everything that you thought was solid. And I've never been in an earthquake, in a real earthquake. There was one time, kind of a little tremor, and that was weird enough feeling. But I can't even imagine being, and that's what people say, being in a true earthquake, when the ground beneath you is moving. It's like, this is what's supposed to be solid. And now it's just moving all around. That's a weird feeling, right? That's the image that the psalmist gives. Said, so whenever everything that you thought was solid, everything that you thought could provide you safety or could provide a refuge for you, when all of that is gone, God is still your refuge and your strength. It keeps going on. It says, though the waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. Right? So we're talking about just a chaotic situation. So who is God in the face of the chaos? There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, a holy place where the Most High dwells. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think of a calm, gentle stream as a good answer to the mountains roaring and falling into the heart of the sea. The river that is probably being referenced here is right. There's some streams that shoot off of the river and go around Jerusalem. And they provided some barrier during King Hezekiah. There was some barrier to enemies that made it harder to attack Jerusalem, right? Just having this stream there. But it also provided life. It provided so much of a source of strength to that city, even though it was just a simple stream. That's the response, right? So the psalm starts off with this chaotic situation, but there is a stream that makes glad the city of God. God responds in a calm but yet powerful way. And then it continues on. It says, God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar. Right? Kingdoms fall. Right? This is throughout history. Most people are just like us. We're just the normal peons, right? We're just the peasants. Throughout history, people get caught up in what's going on in the nation around them. Right? And the nations do stupid things, and that impacts everyone, which is why it's important to know kind of the direction your nation is going, because you want to know, is the nation going to be a support to me, or is it going to make my life a whole lot worse? But the reality is there's not much you can do about it either way. There's a little bit, and I'm not saying give up, but just know that throughout history, nations have been in uproar, kingdoms fall. But even in the midst of that, God is our refuge and our strength. It says, come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. That's a reminder. Look at the things that God has done to make things right. Right? That God does come in, and sometimes he will destroy the evil, that we will see God's justice. Right? God is greater than all of that chaos around you. He's greater than the mountains falling into the heart of the sea. He can do that. He can meet force with force. But that's usually not how he does it. He chooses to be our refuge and our strength in the midst of all of that. But never forget that he is a God who can wipe out if he wants to. Right? And then he continues, he says, he makes the wars cease. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. We like to think we can do that kind of stuff. No. Ultimately, it's going to be him. He's going to be the one that makes things right. And then he says, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in all the earth. That is a powerful model of how we should be responding to the chaos around us. Because the truth is what we need is we need a refuge. We need someone who's going to give us strength. Well, that is found in God and God alone. And what usually happens is we get so consumed with all the chaos going on around us that we don't step back and be still and remember who God is. And this is something that each one of us needs to do on our own, in your own walk with the Lord. No matter what you experience in life, whether it's personal or whether it happens in society, I think it's important for you not to get caught up in the chaos and don't contribute to the chaos, and rather step back and say, I'm going to just be still, and I'm going to know that who the Lord is, and that's the prism I'm going to look at this problem now. Okay, now we can have different opinions on how to move forward. All of that's fine, but we need to have a moment where we step back and slow down and remember that he is God. I wish our society would take this approach. But it's not. Maybe one of these days it will. Maybe there can always be a revival, a spiritual renewal. And maybe one of the ways that can happen is if we model a healthy way of dealing with and wrestling with national tragedy like we experienced a couple of weeks ago. But we also have to know we're living in a society that unfortunately is handling this very poorly. And we've talked a lot this year about the spiritual struggle and the spiritual battle that we're in. And one of the key aspects of that is chaos and division. And what we have seen in light of this horrific shooting, and I mean, we're not going to get into details. You cannot use words to describe how horrific it is. And any halfway sane person, which by the way was the vast majority of people in our country and in the world, look at that event and are just sickened and heartbroken. And that's where we all were as we were finding out these things, right? And rather than being in a society that takes a breath and mourns and grieves and allows itself to be heartbroken and allows itself to recognize the common humanity that we all have, within literally minutes, you are having calls for division, overt calls for division. You know, we've seen recently, you know, and so much of this is because our media is so dishonest. I believe the corporate media, basically anything that you see on television, media-wise, I don't care which, in your mind, which station that is given over to the spirit of the age. It is there to cause division. That is, I believe it may not be on the mission statement, but it is there to cause division. And so we immediately started seeing that. One of the things that's happened over the last few years is kind of the phrase thoughts and prayers, right? I understand how that's can be a trite phrase. Oh, okay, thoughts and prayers. But in light of events like this, people who say something like that or along those lines actually mean that they know that they can't physically do anything, but they can pray, and we can pray together. Then that bonds us, and that calls on God to intervene, that calls on God to bring peace that we know that we can't bring. Right? We know that those families are broken, and there is nothing that can be done that will bring hope to them on a human level. It has to be supernatural. It has to come from God. And the only thing that we can do is that we can pray. And guess what? I know that doesn't feel like enough. And you know what should always go along with your prayers is action. It should impact the way that you live your life too. So I get that. But now all of a sudden, that act of actually praying has started to be mocked, right? And now we actually have political leaders within hours saying literally, F your thoughts and prayers. Now, I understand what that person was meaning. It's like, no, we need to do something, right? I don't want to just hear thoughts and prayers. I get that. But by saying that, what is your purpose? It is to divide. It is to tick people off. We have more overt statements after this event than any others that has, not even subtly, but has said, if you do not support whatever gun control that they are saying, which, banning this or whatever, then you are complicit in the deaths of those children. That you don't care about those children. What is that designed to do? That is designed to divide. And so an event that should be able to kind of unite us in our humanity and in our grief and in our mourning is used to just pull us apart. And so I think about that, and I found myself getting very angry and very frustrated with all kinds of different areas in this, and really thinking, and I had to remind myself, wait, I need to be still. I need to know that God is God. Because we need to start looking at these things in the big picture rather than just going on our emotion. And it has really bothered me, kind of the number of people who have just been saying things like, we just got to do something. Oh, okay, I get that. But maybe we need to slow down. And we need to make sure that what we do is beneficial, is helpful. But one thing, that whenever you slow down and you be still and know that God is God, sometimes you realize that there's nothing that you can do about that. And that's uncomfortable. We don't want to admit things like that. We don't want to admit that, man, there's sometimes you can't prevent evil from happening because we live in a fallen world. Right? And I think all of us have to be really careful of jumping to this conclusion that, you know what, if we just did this, if we just banned all rifles, this wouldn't happen. If we just put more security at schools, this wouldn't happen. If we just armed all teachers, this wouldn't happen. If we just had better locks on the doors, this wouldn't happen. Guess what? None of that would prevent evil from happening. Now, are all of those things that we can consider? Oh, sure, we can talk about any of them. But if we start to think and emotionally respond. And just what we start seeing is well, if you don't agree with my solution, that means you don't care about those kids that died. That's a dangerous place. That is what the spirit of the age is doing in the world around us. And we have to be careful. And I do want to encourage you, and this is how I think about things like this. Whenever I be still, okay, let's really look at all of the aspects of the problem. And things like what happened in Uvalde, it's very uncomfortable when you start looking at all the aspects. Because there were many red flags, but yet I understand why they weren't intervened on either, right? Like, there's so much that goes into it. And I think sometimes, and this is what the media desires for us to feel like the mountains are collapsing on us. And I really get irritated with lies that are used to cause more chaos. And we need to be aware of that, and we need to make sure that we don't contribute to those lies, whichever kind of side of the created debate you fall on, right? And one of the things that I've seen over the last couple of weeks is there's been 27 school shootings this year already. And then you'll see lists, there's been 400 school shootings since Columbine or whatever it is. And I'm like, wait, what do you mean by that? And you start looking, and very few of them are actually people that go into the school to shoot children, right? The vast majority of them there was 2 gangs on Saturday in the school playground, and there was a shootout. That's considered a school shooting. You have to be careful with all that, because I look at that, I'm like, my gosh, things are falling apart. But the way that we present things sometimes makes it worse than it is. Not that, even though it's horrible, right? So there's that. I heard that so often. I think it's important that since Columbine in 1999, there's been 169 people that have been shot in schools. That's 169 people too many, right? But in the big scheme of things, that's over 20 years, okay? We need to try to fix that problem, but that is a hard problem to fix when it only happens that few times. Does that make sense? Now, none of this is beneficial to people who lost a child in Uvalde. But I'm talking about, how do we process this so that we can try to move forward in a healthy way rather than in an unhealthy way? You know, we heard so often, well, all we have to do is deal with the guns. We just need to get rid of the guns. We have, and the church, we need to recognize in America, we have a unique problem that deals with guns that you can't really match within history, because it's just different. So that's a problem that we have to deal with, right? But is the answer just remove them? You know, since 1990, homicides have gone down by about 50%. Gun ownership has gone up. There are way more guns now than there were in 1990, but yet homicides have gone down by 50%. If there was a direct correlation to removing guns, you know, then there should be an increase in homicides, because we've increased guns. Okay? That's just a reality. We need to think about that. Okay, let's just get rid of all rifles. Okay, let's talk about that. 2.5% of all homicides a year come from rifles. 2.5%. There are more murders that happen with people using their hands and their feet than using rifles. Not handguns, all right, but using rifles. So there's a big push now. Let's just ban the rifle. Okay. But that only solves 2.5%. That's assuming that people give up all the rifles that are already out there. Right? We also have to think of the reality of the situation. We live in a world that is flawed. And we live in a world where there are lots of weapons out there. And you can say, well, let's just go take them all back. Okay. There will be consequences to that as well. Right? These are all things that we have to be processing. Okay? And our society is not. Right? And we demonize the weapon, and then we don't even talk about the fact that by numerous studies and different things like that, between 500,000, that's the lowest end of any study that I could find, 500,000 to 3 million crimes are averted every year because someone had a firearm. Now, most of those don't get reported because guess what? You don't report it whenever someone just runs away because they see that you have a firearm. Right? Now, is that a good thing? No, I'd rather none of those crimes ever even be contemplated, but they were. So if we just get rid of all weapons, does that mean that we see an uptick of 3 million more crimes a year? I don't know. Shouldn't we be thinking about this? This is important. We also, I've seen, and I'm basing this on things that I've seen that are written from churches, from different, both perspectives on how we should be handling this. And some churches say we need to be pushing for abolition of guns. Some say we should be pushing for more guns. All this stuff. Right? Some have said we just are uniquely bad in the United States. That our society is crumbling. And guess what? There's some truth to that. You look at the background of this individual, it was very sad. There was no one there to speak some truth or love in his life. So does that make us worse than anyone else? No. Actually, the United States, people will throw out numbers of how violent and things like that. We do have more gun crimes than anyone else because we have more guns and we have more people than most countries. If you look at mass shootings, there's about 97 countries that have had mass shootings. We rank about 65th in that for how many people die each year from mass shootings. Is that bad? Yes. It's a problem in the rest of the world too. I say all of this because I do think it's important that we model a way of responding to tragedy that at least acknowledges that sometimes there are things that there's not much that we can do about it. That doesn't mean that we don't try. It doesn't mean that we don't seek to change behavior. But sometimes we have to recognize that the mountains are falling into the sea and that the best response is to be still and know that He is God. Remember that He is our refuge. He is our strength. He is our ever-present help in times of trouble. And share that message with the world around us. That is the only thing that makes a dent in any of the evil that we see, is when people's lives are changed because they meet Jesus. You can have all the laws you want, and they can all be as well-intentioned. They will not stop evil because we live in a fallen world, which is why we have to know and have to remember that God is our refuge and our strength. And when we start feeling that emotional chaos, that is a time where we need to say, oh, I need to be still. I need to know that God is God. And so then I can clearly think about how to move forward. Don't follow our society's example and meet chaos with chaos. We meet chaos with going to the Lord and finding Him as our refuge and our strength. Let's go to Him in prayer.